Hey guys, you know what it is? Welcome to another how to build guide. Today we will be looking at Seaside Bellona, or Seabell for short. Her limited banner is already over, so if you want to get her, you'll have to wait a long time. Or never, who knows? There hasn't been a rerun of any previous limited units, so I can't say for sure. Seabell is a 5-star Ice-type Ranger unit that offers many utilities. She sits somewhere between a support and a DPS, leaning more towards a DPS side since her base attack is slightly higher than average. If you want a comparison, she has a higher base attack than her normal counterpart. When she is used correctly in PvP, she can stop plays before it even starts. That is how good she is. She also provides extra support with target debuff, and with enough focus can apply defense break on your opponent's turn and sets up your team to deal more damage afterwards. Her performance in PvE contents is pretty good since her debuffs help boost the damage of your team, and she has 2 AoE skills that does well in clearing mobs fast. Basically in PvP she becomes a really good disruptor, while in PvE she's a nice farmer. With all these nice perks, she does come with a few minor disadvantages. I'll talk more about that later on, but for now let's have a look at her skills and see exactly what she has in store. Seabell's first skill, Watch Out, a fitting name by the way once you know what it does, has a 60% chance to apply Target for 2 turns. It's a nice skill. The debuff target will increase all incoming damage by 15% and also reduces evasion chance. Most of the time you will be using this for the extra damage, but if you are in a situation where you are against any unit that utilizes evasion, then this is applicable. Since Seabell already has a built-in target debuff, she doesn't necessarily need to use Song of Stars. If you are using it nevertheless, the only benefit you get from it is the extra 15% more damage when hitting a targeted enemy. When using this skill, she gains 1 focus. What does she need this for? Well, let's find out on her next skill. Seabell's second skill is a passive skill that transfers 30% of the damage she takes and gives it to your frontline ally, basically using your tank as a sandbag. It's nice since her base health is pretty low, lower than that compared to the normal Bellona. This will help her survive in long runs, especially in a lot of the PvE contents. In her skill text it says, when more than 1 damage sharing effect is granted, only the strongest effect is applied. Well, there is an artifact that clashes with this effect. Aureus is one since it takes 10% of the damage taken from the team. As you can see, it also has the same text as Seabell's S2. If you see this in any other artifacts, there's going to be a clash, so keep that in mind when building her. Now don't confuse this with damage reduction effects. These are completely different, so you can use this alongside damage sharing effects. However, only one of each. Every time an ally is attacked, including herself, she gains 1 focus. When an ally is attacked while focus is at 5 stacks, she will consume all and attacks all enemies with a 50% chance to apply a defense break for 2 turns. Now 50% is very low, at least to my standards, to count her as a solid defense breaker, and her skill enhance doesn't help at all. It sucks, however in her case this is not a big problem. You see, if your team gets hit by an AoE attack, all 4 members gets hit, triggers her passive, and she instantly gains 4 stacks of focus. And if she already had her turn, let's say she used her S1, that gives her 1 focus. Altogether, after getting hit by an AoE, this will trigger her AoE defense break. Also, if she gets provoked while having 4 focus, she can still follow it up with her S2. If she is hit with a skill that applies silence at 4 focus, doesn't matter, it will still trigger. Same result when being hit by a counterattack. So in a way, she can counter a counterattack. Seabell's third skill attacks all enemies with an 85% chance to apply both unhealable and unable to be buffed debuffs for 2 turns. It's big. It literally blocks any form of support. At +4 skill enhance, this can go up to 100%. In PvP, you will be laughing your ass off when you use this against Sea Armin and Angelica team comps. It's such a powerful skill. Best used as early as possible. If you crit using this skill, it will do 20% increased damage. May not be as good in terms of damage multiplier compared to units who gets increased damage through soul burn effects, but the conditions are easier to fulfill. It does have a soul burn effect which ignores effect resistance, but most of the time you wouldn't use this, but it's there if you need it. Using this skill will give her 3 focus, which is a nice boost for her S2 AoE. In a PvP setting, if she goes first and use S3, you only need 2 single attacks or an AoE skill to trigger her S2. It's really good. I mean, your opponent is basically setting this up for you. Now, if you want to invest on her skill, the safest one is her S2. This is because there are many applications where this is useful. When you use her for farming, you will be relying on her S2 damage for mob clearing. When doing Wyvern, she will use more of her S2 than her S3. In PvP, depending on where you place her and who you are fighting against, ultimately her S2 will be more helpful than her S3. I'm talking about in most situations. The only time when you would consider investing on her S3 is when you put her in a cleave team where you want to finish the match as soon as possible. Investing on her S3 for the sole purpose of getting the debuff chance to 100% is not really a good idea. 85% is good enough, and it's not like this is useful in all situations, unlike Defense Break. And if you are not a PvP person, there's absolutely no reason to invest in it. Go for S2, it's worth it. If she's someone you would use a lot, then you can get her S3 to max and increase her S1 target debuff chance. Now that we know how she works, let's have a look at possible gears. This build is more towards getting her to the front, mostly used in PvP. The goal here is you don't want to give any chance for the other team to buff themselves. However, doing this will reduce her overall damage, so she's more of a supporting unit. Speed set with either crit or unity is good to help maximize her support kit, and speed to apply both unhealable and unable to be buffed debuffs. Her S3 is best used first, especially when the enemy buffer or healer is right after their turn. Also, making her go first sets up her S2 to trigger faster when the enemy attacks. For main stats on Necklace, attack percentage or crit chance is good to use. You can use crit damage, but the problem with this is that it's very difficult to pull off unless all substats from her gears fits the right places. She is playing a support in this build, so you will be needing both effectiveness and speed. If you add in crit damage, then you are forced to also build crit chance, more crit damage, and attack percentage. For Ring, this will depend, either effectiveness or attack percentage. Just make sure her effectiveness is around 60% to get a consistent land on her debuffs. For Boots, go for speed. The main speed stat you get from a level 85 Boots is double the amount of speed you get from speed set, so you can't skip this one out. You can also build her as DPS. This build sacrifices speed for more total damage output. Now this may sound like a bad idea, especially when bringing her to PvP, knowing that her S3 is best used early. Having less speed just doesn't make sense. Well, the strategy here is a bit different. You will not be relying on speed, rather you will be relying on combat readiness. There are plenty of units that help boost CR. This way, Seabell can still apply her debuffs first, while also doing massive damage to the enemy team. Don't get me wrong, she may still need some speed, and this will depend on which CR pusher you have. For example, if you have any of the lots, they give around 80 to 100% CR. This means less investment on speed compared to someone like Tywin who gives 30% CR. For a DPS build, you can start with attack set paired with crit. If you have decent amount of crit chance from substats, then health set is a good option for her. Necklace should have a main stat of crit damage or crit chance, but if you really want to bump up her damage, crit damage is better. However, this is very difficult and grindy since you have to make sure she has decent amount of crit chance through substats. For ring, attack percentage, and try to avoid effectiveness. The lowest I would give her in my opinion is 40%, and that's scraping the bottom of the barrel. If her effectiveness is just too low, then have a main stat of effectiveness and change it later on. For boots, attack percentage. Substats should have a combination of attack percentage, crit chance, and effectiveness as high priority, while have speed, crit damage, and health as secondary. Attack set is good for early game, and you have the option to transition to destruction set as a late game build. Rage set is an alternative to destruction set and works really well with Seabell's kit. For example, if you trigger S2 and apply defense break, when it gets to her turn, she will do more damage from defense break as well as the rage set's effect. If you have S3 available, it will do even more damage when she crits. If it was the other way, she goes first and use her S3, this will set up her S2 quite nicely to do more damage when the other team attacks. This will serve more as a finisher if using it this way. With this build, you can use her as a decent farmer. The damage on her S2 should be enough to take out mobs when farming Catalyst, fodder units, and even Fire Spirit Altar. Lastly, a bruiser build, and from what other people build her, this seems to be the most popular build. I would say this is the most easiest to build. You don't have to rely on another unit or focus on getting one stat high. With this build, you can just adjust stats to your liking. The only stats you have to keep in mind is that getting crit chance to a decent amount, 80 to 90% chance is good, and you can lower this if you have units who give crit chance aura or devotion. With effectiveness at least 60% and health at 10 to 12k. At 10 to 12k HP, it's equivalent to having 13 to 16k HP, because 30% of the damage she takes is passed on to the front ally. You can use any of the 4 gear sets I mentioned earlier, but the substats will be slightly different, with more priority on health, effectiveness, and crit chance. Throw in a health set if you need more. This is great for slow runs if you prefer to chip at your enemies bit by bit and playing it safe. Definitely something you can use in a lot of the difficult PvE contents. With this build, you can probably slip her in a defense team. Her damage transfer is very helpful and bumps up her survivability. In PvP, I prefer to rely on a CR pusher rather than build speed because of 2 things. First, I don't want to prioritize getting high speed at a cost of damage. Finding gears that has both is ridiculously grindy, and you have to be very lucky. The second reason is that not every PvP fight will be free of immunity. You will see this a lot in higher ladder. If you build her this way and fight a team where half of them are equipped with immunity sets, then she's only there for damage, and since you prioritize on speed over damage, she will be pretty much useless. With a CR pusher, you have the choice to either push Seabell to shut down plays or push another unit when things doesn't go according to plan. The only weakness to this that I can think of is if your CR pusher is slower than the enemy team. For artifacts, Rengar's special drink is good, but I would only use this when you invest a lot on this artifact to the point where the trigger chance is at least 80%. Using it at base 50% is really bad, it's not worth it. It's basically screaming it's useless half the time. Bloodstone is an option if you need extra survivability for your team. This is your go-to artifact. This is something you would use if you're adding her to your defense team. For 4-star artifact, Rosa Hargana is okay to use, best paired when using a unity set or even better when using a dual focus team composition. Dual attacks will increase her focus by 1, making it faster to trigger her S2 AoE defense break. Portrait of Saviors can be used for her. Since you want her to be on the front to apply the debuffs, most likely your opponent's team will have more than 50% HP, and this gives her a boost in damage. This is definitely something you would use in a cleave team, or if you want to use her for farming. Another one is Infinity Basket. What's good about this is that Seabell's S1 can apply target debuff. If it triggers a dual attack, the second attacker will benefit from the debuff, as well as the 20% more damage provided from the artifact. If the second attacker also has an extra effect on their S1, then even more of a fitting artifact. For 3-star artifacts, you have a few to choose from. Axe if you need the extra crit, however I would only use this in a PvE content. Joker for the extra damage, or Exorcist Tonfa, which is a downgraded version of Portrait of Saviors. With artifacts where you need to gather stacks such as Axe or Memorandum, Seabell's S2 can add a stack, so it's a plus if you want to use it. Seaside Bellona is great in both PvE and PvP. She excels in Wyvern 11 due to the boss's skill. Every attack from the Wyvern will add 1 focus for Seabell. Regardless of how many debuffs you throw at it, it will always attack 3 times. And that's a good thing. If she has 2 or more focus from the previous battle, you have a chance to proc a first turn defense break, and this sets up the rest of your run for an easy nuke. If it doesn't proc, then you have another turn to use it again if her S3 is available. Also, her kit is full of debuffs, which will help your front ally survive the Wyvern attacks. For those who don't know, if the boss has 3 or more debuffs, damage is significantly decreased. For the Wyvern, that is. She's also a really good farmer. AoE on both S3 and S2 will make your runs faster. However, AoE on S2 do need charging up, so it's a bit slower compared to other farmer units. Now, one of the questions you may ask is that, is Seabell good enough as a solid defense breaker? The answer to that is, it depends. If you are doing a run where the boss has an AoE attack, then she is. If a majority of the attacks are single target, you're better off bringing another defense breaker. You can bring her in most PvE contents, Wyvern, Asmakalis, Spirit Altar, Story, and she tends to be pretty annoying in PvP. I'd say she's sitting next to Dizzy if you don't have Destina in your team. Speaking of PvP, you can use her in 2 different ways. When you are attacking, she is best used as early as possible, at least faster than your opponent's buffers and healers. Her job is to block off opponent plays, from Angelica's AoE immunity, see Armin's AoE invincibility, to DN's ridiculous buffs, or any other similar units. In lower PvP ladder, she works well using speed set just for that sole reason. If you are using attack, rage, or destruction sets, you will probably need help from other units that can boost combat readiness to make sure she is on the front. Any of the lots, Shuri, Baiken, Tywin, to name a few, will be a good pair when using these sets. However, in higher PvP ladder, using her is going to be a challenge. Seabell on defense, on the other hand, is pretty good, I'd say. She doesn't necessarily need to go first because the strategy is a bit different. You want them to attack you first, stack her focus, and trigger her AoE defense break. By the time it gets to her turn, she uses her S3 and wipes the other team. You can throw in a Dizzy or a more annoying unit, even add her to an evasion team to make sure she can survive till that point, and divert attention off her. If the other team has cleanse or immunity, then at least she's not too useless since you invested damage on her. But if you prefer to use speed set and put her first, that works too. She does have some counters. First turn immunity, or fighting teams with cleanse will be a big blow on her. And shutting her down with single target skills is the safest way of taking her out without triggering her S2. She is pretty annoying fighting against, especially when your team has a lot of AoE skills. If you leave her, she will be spamming her S2. And that's all I have for Seabell. I am a bit biased regarding her gears, but that's because of all the times I tried different builds on her. Speed set is the most difficult to work with. Focus on speed and her damage plummets down. Build her damage and her S3 becomes hard to use without the help of other units. It's ridiculous. I don't know why this is happening. But hey, if it works for you, high speed and consistent damage, cheers to you. That build is, I would say, the ultimate build for her. Thanks for watching, and with that, Rover out.